This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of bringing the PE guy coming to his first Halo Talks. Here's Johnny.
Here I am.
Good to see you, bro. Well,
nice
you look a little different in person than in your shticks. But let's first start off. We're both in the SoulCycle ecosystem. So you are a SoulCycle instructor up in Boston. I'm on my 650 ride, being in New York, the SoulCycle cult. So how'd you get involved in the industry? And then we'll pivot to some of the shticks that you're doing.
Yes, 650 is nothing to shake a stick at. That's pretty intense. But I started riding in Chicago, where I'm from. I was living in Chicago. I started riding in 2015 and in the fall. And I was just like, this is crazy. I was between jobs trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Like, this is crazy. These people are like superstars and I want to be one of them. And yeah. I loved the workout. I loved the vibes of the whole studio. I loved everything about it. So I just was like, I have to do it. And they're like, 2 months after I first started riding, they hosted auditions. And I was like, all right, I guess I could do that. So I auditioned with like 60 people in this room, and they all are fitness professionals. They look the part, they get on the mic, they act the part. And I get up there and I'm just like, I just remember like my audition was such a blur, but I remember being like, this is weird. Like, I feel like I'm facing the wrong way up here. This is so weird. Right. While I'm saying it, I'm like, I'm not getting this job. And they picked 2 of us out of the 60. And I went to training in group 21 of training at SoulCycle in 2016. We started January. There were 21 of us. I graduated with like 14 of us. The other girl who came from Chicago with me didn't make it to training. I was like, how did I get here? They relocated me to Boston, and that's the rest is history. I was in Boston full-time for 5 or 6 years at SoulCycle. And then I dropped down to part-time, which has been good on my body and my work-life balance,
Yeah. I used to follow Mantis back in New York and Jadis on 29th Street. So I was always in bike 54, I think, was like directly on the top shelf. Some of the things I loved were the shout outs that were going on. And I kind of like transferred my disposable income from nightclubs to SoulCycle classes. So I had no problem with that trade-off. And it's pretty awesome, the community that they set up. As you do to stay on SoulCycle for a minute, obviously they did a deal with ClassPass, and they had to make some tweaks to the business model. Do you still feel like it's still the same energy level and experience? Obviously in your classes they are, but how do you feel about it? Because I'm comfortable where we're at right now, but unfortunately there's not one in Arizona. I'd love to get one here.
Yeah, I think it's different than it was. Like anything, I think it's changed a lot. Obviously, as a business has changed, there's a lot more competition out there. But I always say, no matter what happens when I'm in that room, if I'm taking someone's class or I'm teaching my own, no one can take that experience away from us. So while I don't think that SoulCycle has the same share of the market that it used to, because it had everybody and it was like the thing, I don't think it has the same like buzz that it used to, and the vibe when you walk into a studio. Classes are not all full the way they were in 2017. Yeah. A monkey could sell out at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, Thursday night. Like, it didn't matter what time of year. And so I think it's changed a lot. But I think that nothing changes. Those doors close. It's dark in there. That energy, it always hits for me.
Let's talk about like what you've been doing and the notoriety and positivity that you've gotten from creating this PE guy. Where you got that little facial filter, or do you actually physically do that?
That's a filter, thankfully. I can't make my face look like that naturally. Yeah, it's a filter.
But when did this start and why? What kind of propagated this whole, ultra personality, change?
I had been thinking for years about how you get stuck talking to somebody at a wedding. And it was a particular kind of guy usually. And so I kind of joked with friends about that. Like, oh, I got stuck talking to that guy. Or my friend group would like leave me in the corner talking to somebody and somebody talking at me. And then in March, I just found this filter. I was like, this is kind of like the guy you get stuck talking to at a wedding. Like, that's like, this is the face. It just popped. Yeah. I was like, this is great. So I started posting to Reels in March, at the end of March this year. And it just like took off. And I was like, whoa. And he didn't have a job at first. He was just the guy who gets stuck talking to at a wedding. And I was like, I got to give this guy a job. And I realized a lot of the people I was talking to were works in PE. So I was like, oh, okay. Like he's like, okay, he works in private equity and he talks about that a lot. Then it morphed into, I could have picked any profession, honestly. It was like a shot in the dark, and I picked PE. And then I think that kind of elevated him to another level. And people were like, oh my gosh, this is, because I have no experience in PE at all.
Right. Finance.
So I was just like, I got lucky that I picked this guy. And everyone's like, this is PE. This is what PE guys are like. And I was like, oh, well, you tell me, because I don't know. I don't work with them. But he turned into PE guy. And so it was the first video did well. The second one, I was like, all right, let's see if this happens again. I posted it blows up. And then I just was like, all right, I'm on this treadmill. Like the algorithm has opened up and I'm like, gotta feed it. And it's been amazing. I mean, the opportunities like I never would have imagined, really.
Yeah, I'm sure. But, as you kind of like put these videos together, I've had conversation. I was at a dinner like 3 weeks ago with a couple of friends of mine. They're like, yeah, my buddy, this fund, he's got like 6 golf club memberships. I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, I play like maybe 6 rounds of golf a year if I'm lucky. And I usually only play like 9 or 12 holes because I'm fucking busy, dude. I'm like, I don't have time for this, right? Mm-hmm. And then the guy's like telling me like, oh yeah, one of them, he's got a membership in New Zealand. And I'm just like, dude, like what kind of use of capital is this? Like, you're supposed to be like really efficient use of capital if you're a private equity guy. And then like your lifestyle has like ridiculous, unnecessary spending. So how did you either research this or how did you just know that this shit's having conversations, not just a wedding conversation, but this is like, just like you meet someone in an elevator and this shit kind of just spews out of them.
Yeah. Well, I would say a lot of it is my personal experience talking to people who would just like tell me these things. And I'm like, I do, you're speaking Chinese to me. Yeah. And then I have a general understanding of what private equity does, like a little bit. And I've heard from people whose companies have been acquired by private equity people, friends who are dentists and things like that, who are like, they took this and they shrunk it and then they've ruined it, or I've heard people with good experiences. So I've heard it all from them and then from people who are affected by what they do. So, they and just like a lot, how people are like, oh, he's only 35. How does he fly privately or what? I'm just making an example. Like, and people are like, oh, he's in private equity. And that's it. And like, I'm supposed to just go like, oh, okay. Like that makes sense to me, Like you said, though, the use of capital, I think is funny because I think that they probably have a world where they are trying to keep up and they acquire a business and they're going to very, very efficiently use capital for that business. But then in their own life, they seem to be a little bit some of them a little bit haphazard, like a runaway train, because they're among other people who are buying watches and flying privately. And so just, I don't know, I just hearing from the people themselves,
And obviously you've got a lot of, viral activity on this and guys love it who are in PE or outside of PE or hedge funds or what have you. Have you had any backlash? Has anyone said like, hey man, like, cut it down a bit, or like you're giving us a bad name, or it's all just been like, hey, we'll take the satire?
No, there's really been no backlash at all. I have clocked it every 2 weeks. Somebody comments, "You're not funny," and I'm like, that's cool. A pretty good. Comedy's subjective. I totally understand that some people don't find it funny. Some people don't find some of the best comedians in the world to be funny. So I'm not saying I'm the best one of the best. I'm just. But I have not heard from anybody saying, you're giving us a bad name. I imagine there's some groups of very, very stuffy PE guys out there, maybe at Blackstone or something, who see it and are just like, oh, I don't want to see that again. Like that guy drives me nuts. I was at a wedding, and where does she work? At Bain. Yeah, I was at a wedding and a woman. The only backlash I will say was in person to me was a woman who works at Bain, who's high up, whatever that means. Yeah. And she works within private equity in Bain, I think. And she was a little drunk probably. And she came up to me and she just was like, "You're really annoying." And I was like, I was like, oh, okay. Well, my character is really annoying. And she was like, well, you are your character. So you're really annoying. And it was not a productive conversation at all. But I also think that there's something funny to be said for like, I put myself out there and some people, this is other creators have this problem too. And people in comedy, like people think that they can tell you, people give me feedback all the time. Like do a different character, it's usually not negative, but I was like, that is like the equivalent of me walking up to you and saying something like, it's like not
like you should do management consulting or something, right? Or you should,
well, yeah,
like,
that kind of stuff.
I should like move to another. They're just saying to me, like, you should do something different than your day job, right?
Yeah, or like this girl being like, you know, you're annoying, and I was like, oh, okay, and she just kept hammering it. Like the rest of the night, like she was like, you're annoying. And I think she was really drunk and like a stressed out mom who has a busy life. And so, but I was just like, and I gave her a lot of grace. I was like, you know, most people would be like, fuck off, you know? And I was at my friend's wedding. She's like related. She knows my friend. So I was just like, and after the wedding, I said to my friend, I was like, that was like the worst interaction I've had with somebody. She just was like calling me annoying. And I was like, I know the part of the character is that he's annoying. And like, but I think she works in private equity. And I think that she's kind of like, there's a little bit of like you don't know what you're talking about, like, you know, get out of here kind of thing. And I'm like, just keep that to yourself.
Yeah. You know, I did something funny the other day. A buddy of mine told me to go on to ChatGPT, which I use like very aggressively. And it said, just roast me. And like I had ChatGPT roast me, and it was some of the funniest shit that I've ever like. It was pretty hardcore, and I sent it around to my team because I think at some point you actually need to laugh at yourself and actually have like a self-awareness. So what you're doing actually may have a very positive impact on having people look in the mirror and be like, hey, maybe we should tone this down. And maybe like the 3 country clubs might be enough for the 6. Or if I have 6, maybe I should just talk about 3. You know, like maybe this isn't like how I want to present myself to the world, right? I mean, like,
it's not at all. I keep saying to people, I'm not anti-capitalism. I'm not anti-have money. I'm just like, have it and don't talk about it. I know some people who are really successful. I know people whose parents are like billionaires, literally, and you would never know. You would absolutely never know anything about them, like that they have the bet. So when someone comes up to them and is like, "Oh, I just bought this," I'm like, "Well, you know, this person could like double zing you, and they're not going to because they're, you know."
Yeah, that was always a thing in the like. There's a guy who does like the Goldman Sachs elevator tweets who I used to follow, and that was pretty funny. But it was there was something about like when I used to work at J.P. Morgan Chase, and I worked at Donald Slufkin and Jen Rett before we started our own firm, Integrity Square. But there's this story about like, you know, there's a guy in a sweatsuit and he's in the elevator and all these guys in, you know, in suits, and then they get off and they're like, who's that guy? He's like, oh, he's the client, you know. He can dress however he wants. Like, and he's the guy who actually is a billionaire, and everyone else is just, you know, basically the banker and the advisor, you know, peppering to him, and he wears whatever he wants. Did you actually ever do stand-up comedy, or is that something that you're doing, or are you just doing reels?
I've done a lot of improv. Like I lived in LA for a little bit. Sweet. I lived in Chicago. I did improv stuff, but like, you know, classes, not like I was on a troupe.
Oh, okay.
And then I did do a stand-up class in Chicago that I thought was brutal. I was just like, this is like somebody telling me like how to do the art of it, and I didn't really like necessarily respect the instructor or whatever. He was kind of like this guy on a skateboard who was like always high and late. And I was like, and I didn't find him to be particularly funny. So I was like, oh, I'm not fitting in here for this mold of like what this guy thinks I should do. You know, he was like critiquing my set. And I was just like, I watch enough stand up to know that like that what you just said is not right. So I kind of had a bad experience with stand up for the first time. And I've thought about how to get back into it. It takes a lot of balls to do stand up.
I tried it a couple of times down in on the Lower East Side, and I had my notes with me, and you know, it was like a 5 o'clock, you know, like just people that would need some airtime. And once that light hits you, you fully appreciate it. It's like I just did years ago. I went and trained like a firefighter for a day at Randall's Island. And that was a very humbling experience. And I felt like the second most humbling experience was getting on the comedy, you know, stand up and looking out at the crowd, be like, shit, dude, like I am like literally, there's nothing else here except me. Yeah. And I either kill this, bomb it, or just like become very irrelevant.
That's why I prefer improv, because if I'm on a stage, because you can go like, whoa, actually, I'm going to stay out of this. Like, I'm not ready. Like I'm going to back up, you know?
Yeah. If you where were you in LA, and how long was that part of SoulCycle? Or that was
no, that was pre SoulCycle. I was in LA for 2 years after college, 2012 to 2014, and I lived in the Valley in like Toluca Lake technically, but I worked at the Ellen Show for 2 years.
Oh, nice.
And that was pretty, you know, what you would imagine.
Gotcha. So let's kind of fast forward back to where we are today. You know, where do you want to take this guy, and where did this character go? And I don't know if you could expose any of the interesting partnerships or calls that you get. Obviously, if there's things that are not printed or not necessarily talk about, but just so people understand what brands potentially want to be associated with this and which ones are on the edge of thinking about you as somebody they want to support or back or be associated with.
Yeah,
as a character,
I would say,
as a character, right? As a character.
Yes. Yeah. I would say I probably right now, like almost half, like the partnership stuff is taking over a little bit more. It used to be partnerships were like maybe a quarter of what I was doing, and cameos, personalized videos were 75%. Now it's more 50-50. Okay. And so I'm 50-50, like partnerships and then cameos, these personalized videos. So I'm making personalized videos every day for people, for birthdays, whatever. And those are fun. And those are there's some like VIP people who are like, I have to sign things. I can't tell anybody that I made it for them, that kind of stuff, which is fun. And then the partnerships is really cool. That has kind of really ramped up. And the brands that like working with me there's a lot of B2B, like software companies. I did one for Black Tux, for Cadillac worked with me. I'm trying to think of some like B2B software companies that you might not really know. I'm working on a couple right now. And, that what's interesting, to answer the other part of your question, is that there are some, like the luxury brands are very, very like afraid they don't want to make fun of you. I have to be like, they have to be comfortable making fun of their customer, their client, basically. And a lot of them are not. Like a NetJets is like super. They were like, no, we're not. We don't make fun of our customers. Like we can't. That's not an angle we've ever tried. So even the ones that are like, we want to try comedy, the back and forth with them for these scripts is like, it's difficult because they're very like, oh, I don't know if we should say that. Like they do not want to push the boundaries. And sometimes I'm like, well, if you're one of however many in this world and you want this to be splashy and unlike anything you've ever done, like let me take it in. But I'm also like, you're paying me, so I'll do whatever you say.
Yeah. But do they ask for like editorial like sign off, and you're like basically like final cut? Now you're like, hey, like I'm the PE guy. The PE guy talks the way he talks, and I'm not necessarily going to curate PE guy for, to like fit into your box, because then I'm out of my own box, right?
They do ask for that, but I'm also really comfortable pushing back and just being like, this is me. It has to be something I'm proud of saying. Right. Some people have said they want me to say things I'm not comfortable with, or they don't want me to say certain things. And I'm pretty movable in that way, but I'm also ultimately, I'm like, if I'm not proud of it, like I will go back and forth with you until I am. And if it's like a breach of contract, it's never happened, but I'm like, if it's a breach of contract and you're like, well, you said we could, I'd say like, this isn't what I agreed to. And I would back out before I posted something I wasn't, proud of. Every once in a while, posting an ad feels a little bit like dirty. I feel a little bit like I'm kind of like, but I'm like, so many people are doing this on the internet. I'm just capitalizing on the moment, which is I am hot in the moment right now. And I know maybe in a year, or in 5 months, or in 3 years, 10 years, I'm not relevant anymore on the internet. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
I think if you do it as contextual marketing and it's done true to your character, you're good. There's a woman, I'll just mention her name. There's this woman named Chloe who is one of these tech influencers, and she was so awesome. And then Microsoft got a hold of her, and every one of her posts now feels like a fucking Microsoft commercial, dude. And it's like so evident that I've like lost. I'm not. Her authenticity's gone with me. Like it's just too much, right?
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
And I think they dangle. I think that eventually somebody comes around and dangles something at you that you're like, all right, I'm willing. It's like the definition of selling out. And I don't know what would happen to me if I was presented with something like that. But my goal is to always make the people that came here in the beginning in March of this year be like, okay, he's still on this track. Okay, we can understand and respect the fact that he's trying to make money off of this and he's got an ad here, but I want them to stay around for the whole ad, because they're like, oh, this is actually also a funny bit that he's doing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not just me being like, I love this product and they do this and that. Like that is where you start to lose people.
Yeah, exactly. So how many times do you need to post a week to feel like, hey, I'm like satisfying my users, and how much is too much?
I post on stories every day. And then I'm not really worried about posting too much on TikTok at all. I'll post random stuff there. And then on Instagram Reels, that's like the big thing. And I make sure to post at least 4 Reels a week.
Yeah. Okay. I see most of them then.
Sometimes it's like, sometimes I'll go 3 days in a row where I post one a day. Sometimes I'll go like 3 days in a row where I don't post anything. Like, and that's just me being like, all right, like I was at my stepbrother's wedding this weekend. I was like, all right, busy, can't post from here. So waited a couple days and then came back and I full core, and I'm still playing with it. I'm still like, and I don't think that 1 week is indicative of the next. Like the content I put out this week, something I posted yesterday didn't do as well as normal. And then I posted an ad today. So it was like a double whammy because the ads are intentionally suppressed by Instagram. So I'm like, all right, you're going to have 2 that are kind of like meh, So I'm like, better knock it out of the park tomorrow or on Sunday or Monday.
Just to get into like your creative brain, are you constantly, taking notes, or you like looking around, there's something happen, or you end up like walking by like a PE conference that's going on in Boston and be like, oh shit, like that's it. That's funny. Or you see something, you say something. How do you create the creative?
Yeah.
Without giving us too much of the DNA of like how this shit really like comes to your brain.
Rarely do I write something down. Like every once in a while, especially in the beginning when I was doing cities specifically, I was pretty much only doing like city by city. It was like PE guy in Seattle, PE guy in Chicago. And that was fun. But like, I would write down like, oh, I forgot about Tampa. Like I'd write that down on a note, and then I'd go home and start to like write the script. But now the ideas come to me like yesterday I was walking my dogs and I saw a story about a beached whale in Nantucket. And I saw that story at 4:30 p.m. I had written, edited, produced a reel and posted it by 5:30 p.m. Like just like in that hour it happened. And so like a lot of stuff will just come up, or I'll just be like, I'm going to put the phone really close to my face and be like, good morning from Amagansett. I've never been to Amagansett. No idea. But I'm just like, I'll just say like, oh, Tarantino's playing with his flute in the backyard. And it's so silly. So those are moments that remind me to come back to just like the silly and not a scripted thing, and more just like sometimes I read off a script and I'm trying to get through 3 minutes of like, he lives in Chicago, he goes to this club, his office is here, blah, 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 blah. And then other times I'm just like, we're having a really wonderful time on Nantucket. And wifey slipped last night because she took too many pills, like whatever it is. and like that, like natural, I think that's a nice mix of like, of the two. There's like a scripted where it's very clear that I'm reading something. And then there's just like I'm standing next to my car and there's a big tree behind me and I'm like, beautiful fall in the Berkshires, Yeah,
right. That's great. Well, these are a lot of our clients. Some of them we love dearly. Some of them we question their authenticity and their own, social status and what that means to them. If you need a certain watch to like feel like you like relevant in a room, I mean, that's your call. I personally don't. I got my phone on I got the clock on my iPhone, but look, everyone's got their own thing. But I do think what you're doing is an important. I think it was like, Seinfeld and, they were doing like a whole thing about comedy and talking about like some of the censorship that could happen. It's like, if you can't laugh at yourself, you can't laugh at the world. It's actually really hard to change the world unless you actually poke fun at it and say like, look, this is actually a ridiculous way something is happening. And that kind of turns people's, eyes on like, yeah, actually that doesn't make sense to me. Or, hey, wow, like, interesting perspective. I didn't really look at it that way. So hopefully it's creating positive change, or at least it's giving some people something to like laugh at themselves or roast themselves and say like, yeah, that's how I actually am. Yeah. Like, at least I know who I am. And I'm okay with it, right?
Yeah. I've had people in my life say to me, hey, or be talking to me and go like, oh my gosh, I just sounded like your character. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. That's like, dude, that's good, man. That's a positive feedback, right? Not like you're annoying, Johnny.
Right, exactly. Like that one girl. Like, I'll never forget her.
You won't. But you're always gonna have one critic for like the two guys in the Muppet Show on the Statler and Waldorf from the top shelf. Like, hey guys, you're like she's piggy, she's a little fat. Yeah, dude, she's a fucking pig. Obviously, So hey man, well look, I love what you're doing. We cover the private equity market, so obviously everything you're doing rings true to us. And we got a blacklist of private equity guys we don't do business with, and we got a hot list of guys we do. And Halo sector is where we're at. So we're trying to change the world on solving obesity, loneliness, and diabetes with private equity capital to help entrepreneurs. And love that you're in SoulCycle. When I saw your email address, I was like, dude, I get to talk to a SoulCycle instructor. Who cares if you're a PE guy? I've interviewed Sumner on the Halo Talks, Jadis, Mantis, Noah, Ruth Zuckerman. Like I've got them all on the Halo Talk. So you're in my like SoulCycle section with like an asterisk of like, you know, our PE guys. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on the show, bro. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You have a great weekend too.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks, your captain speaking. I am the founder and managing partner at Integrity Square. We've been around now for 15.5 years. We have been helping people like yourselves get capital, do mergers and acquisitions, consulting, strategic advice in the health, active lifestyle, and outdoor Halo sector, trying to help as many entrepreneurs as possible get to the next level, take that inflection point, and be the force behind your growth. We are helping companies that have at least $3 million of EBITDA, around $10 million of revenue, and we are positioned to help you get institutional growth capital or to negotiate deals with strategic partners. If you go to integritysq.com/ISQ, you can see our capabilities deck. Happy to set up a consultation at any time. That is free of charge, and we look forward to helping solve obesity, loneliness, and diabetes. Go Halo.